So welcome. Pastor James is very, very familiar with my voice, and I'm going to have to apologize ahead of time. I've been doing nothing but presentations for the last 2 days, and my voice is starting to show the effects. So I'm Leslie Ashby Sorel, and I started this journey in regards to looking for relatives that my dad, who has since passed away, had charged me with finding. It was his brother George. And I jump into this story from this direction because it's pretty, uncanny the way that, God works and brings us together. So one day I decided to reach out to the state of New Jersey, where my Uncle George lived last. And I reached out to the organization to get a copy of a death certificate because normally someone of this age probably have passed away. Very quickly, they told me this is such an old birth certificate that they probably don't have it and it's at the locality. And they sent me to the Monmouth Historical Society. And I said, okay. And I called the number right away, expecting the same thing that I had received for the past 2 years prior. And a gentleman answered the phone and I told him what I needed. And I literally heard him hit the floor and he started weeping. And, that's unusual, I would say. So I sat quietly. He gathered himself and he said, "You're looking for George Ashby?" I said, "Yes, I'm Leslie Ashby, Sorel, as I indicated." And he said, "We've been looking for you." And he went into a story about a gentleman who was a Civil War veteran. And it had rung a bell because I saw that in some of my research, but I knew that this was not my father's brother because my father's brother would have been born in the 20s or the late 1910s. So I let him finish, and he was so excited. And he talked about this great project that they were building a park that was honoring my uncle, who was the longest living Civil War veteran in the state of New Jersey. And this is just fantastic because they were doing a lot of outreach to the family and couldn't find anyone. So I didn't want to disappoint him. And, God was telling me there's probably some connection there. So I said, well, that's all fantastic. I'm glad it's happening. Yay. And then I said, but the gentleman I'm looking for would not have fought in the Civil War. Highly unlikely. I said, this gentleman would have lived between this period and approximately this period. And he settled down. And when we got off the phone, I did a little research. I asked a few more questions. And lo and behold, every now and then you come across a huge, huge nugget. And there it was that my family was not from where we originally thought. We were from the area in Virginia where Sergeant George Ashby actually emanated from. And fast forward in that conversation with the gentleman from the commission, Mr. Fabiano, actually, John Fabiano. So if you're on, John, thank you. Thank you always. He invited me to speak to the council of the borough. And I took advantage and I went down, and right before I walked out of the door, and it still gives me goosebumps as I talk about it, I couldn't put together how George got from the Eastern Shore and landed in Allentown and lived there for so many years. What was the connecting dot? And as I said, this thing is bigger than me. Something said, sit down immediately, even though you're late to get to Allentown, and search this name this way. And I did. And it was the name of the relative, the ancestor that I found in the Eastern Shore, but he showed up as George's father living in Allentown, New Jersey. Mind blowing, because we knew there were relatives. I knew that there were relatives, but they were never named. We never visited them. There was no discussion of history. And in a lot of African American families, you'll find that tradition of, telling stories forward is really something that keeps our history alive. So I was unaware. So immediately, I'm the kind of person, a bit type A. I threw myself into the research, and it's now 13 years later about, and I've learned so much more about not only my Ashby relatives, but many of you on the phone, if you're out of the same town of Allentown and are of Chew descendancy, Van Orkin descendancy, Johnson descendancy, Richardson descendancy, I can go on and on and on. There was a lot of intermarriage with the Ashby family over the years. So what I'd like to do is kind of jump into why Allentown, and more importantly, Union A&Me is so critical, not only in African American history, not only in American history, but in global history. This is a unique place that has been the nexus of civil and social justice giants. And I mean giants, those who are the bedrock to having put forth and paved the way for folks like the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X's. So go on this journey with me as we talk about a legacy of service. My father used to always say, "Don't watch Roots," because you traumatize yourself over and over and over and over. And I remember having funny conversations with my mother because we had to watch Roots. I had to do it for school. I was in the fifth grade. I had to do it. And my father would say, it's never a good thing to start from a place where it's not your beginning. And many, many, many decades later, after I've gone to the continent of Africa, he's absolutely right. The history is incredibly rich before Africans were enslaved, both in the Americas, North and South, and the Caribbean. So one of the things I like to talk about is how did the African Americans get to Allentown? And as I was doing my genealogy study, what I found was that a lot emanated from, of course, the South, but in particular sections of the South, the Eastern Shore of both Maryland and Virginia. And I didn't think I just read or heard that someone's brother is in the Eastern Shore as we speak. And I was like, really? One of the members of the church. And it's okay. So, it's always further proof of what you see in censuses and what you see in the Messenger, Allentown Messenger, with obituaries where they were born and where their parents came from and where they went to school for high school versus where they went to elementary school. It's very, very interesting to find that those migration patterns are similar. And it makes sense because if you look at any immigrant community, generally someone's uncle, aunt, mom, or dad will go and they'll say to their brother or sister or cousin, yeah, it's pretty cool out here. Work is great. You can buy a house, you can build a life. So it didn't shock me. But what did shock me was that the notable members, and forgive me if there's a name not on here, I'll take the heat for that, Pastor James. The notable folks that came through Union A&Me and have gone on to do amazing things, both locally and, as I indicated, internationally, come from such unique stories in African American and American history that it warrants deeper research. And I share with Pastor James that that's why I've been doing this for 13 years, because it's not just about the Ashby. It was about how they got here, why they stayed, and what they contributed. And the way that they came, because I couldn't figure out how this Black man in 1830s, 1840s was traveling not once, not twice, multiple times from Virginia to Jersey. He was literally bringing people with him and taking people back down, which is, I couldn't figure it out. And when I left the borough meeting, I go outside and I'm looking around because Allentown's very reminiscent of a town that my husband's from, Nyack, New York. And if you know the Hudson Valley area, very bucolic, beautiful, old homes, lots of history, close to a metropolis, and full of unspoken of history that's literally under your feet, arm's length away. And I'm standing there and it hit me. I said, the Underground Railroad. I had not taken a look at the Underground Railroad and where it ran through in New Jersey. Who would have thought that this Bucola town with corner stores, and so I go to the corner store and I'm getting a water so I can have some water on the way home, and I'm talking about this out loud, and the store owner says, "Oh yeah, there's a little room upstairs where they used to hide people." And I said, "It makes sense." Evidently, my ancestor was able to go back and forth, bring family to New Jersey, and take family back down, including Uncle George's brother, who wanted to go back to Virginia, where he was free in Virginia, but he certainly was living under a different circumstance than perhaps in New Jersey. But he did go back. My uncle came back and forth. My great great grandfather came back and forth. They even appeared in court in 1846 to make sure that family members who were supposed to be manumissioned by the age of 25 were actually manumissioned. And they went to court and they sued successfully. So when I look at these names, I know the sacrifice. I've read sacrifice. I've been to where they were and that road back home. It's amazing what they were able to accomplish. It's literally with the grace of God. Only God could have made these things happen. And when you scan the list, you have unique families such as the Woobies, who are founders of UNAME. They also, as you may know, were in the restaurant business and the hotel business since the early 1800s, all the way until the 1900s, mid 1900s. That's an amazing fact. They were entertainers, they were restaurateurs, they invested in the community, they served in the four air forces, I mean, the forces, not the Air Force, the forces, and they continue to do fantastic things. The Chu family, same thing there. A very, very well-known family, particularly for being pastors and reverends. The Turner family, another stalwart family. The Turner family, Reverend Turner was who actually helped to prepare Martin Luther King with the help of the NAACP for his first sit-in before it became a thing, as the kids say. That's huge. That's strategic planning. I don't know if you saw the movie Rustin, but he was the first Rustin. And then the Van Orkies and the Coles, and even Octavius Valentine Cato, one of the preeminent social justice warriors that precedes those of modern times. He literally graced the original Union AME with his presence. His dad was a Presbyterian minister who had bought himself out of slavery. His mother was from a privileged class in the South of Creole family members. And his dad somehow befriended Governor Newell of the time. And Octavius Cato attended the all-white Allentown Academy. And we're talking about times where, that was virtually impossible. So the Cato family, the Still family, Turner family, the Chu family are all by extension and some by directly involved with UNAME. It's no way that UNAME could not be a place where you understood the importance of civic engagement, you understood the importance of social justice, and you lived your life accordingly. So I wanted to kind of go through some of those folks that I've come across because I can't do them all. So we may have to have a part two, Pastor James. I don't know. But one of the things that I thought was so interesting is that not everybody came to New Jersey through the Underground Railroad. There were folks who were enslaved, originally enslaved in New Jersey once they arrived to North America and to the then colonies. One of the gentlemen, Oliver Cromwell, who I think is important to talk about because he had 14 children who on average had 10 to 14 children themselves and probably helped promulgate mid-Jersey just from his own lineage. He was born of free black men in Black Horse. And he did several things. He was on the boat when Washington crossed the Delaware. He was with Washington on every major battle in New Jersey and beyond. Clearly, he was made of strong stuff. He became a Starian. So he crossed that 100-year bridge. He served for 6 years of constant battle. He was awarded the Badge of Military Merit, and his discharge papers were signed by George Washington himself. He was an amazing man. Farmed, took care of a disabled daughter. He was a Renaissance man, taught himself to read. And subsequently, at the end of his life, he was posthumously given the Badge of Military Merit. And he was right down the road, Burlington, New Jersey. We talked a little about this gentleman, Octavius V. Cato. This is a real Renaissance man. He not only attended Allentown Academy, he also built and founded the Banneker Institute. If you ever have the opportunity, that's almost similar to what we now would call the Brookings Institute for African Americans. He was a man of many talents. He could play cricket, he could play baseball with the best of them. He helped to create the Negro Leagues. He founded the Philadelphia baseball team called the Pythian Baseball Club. And last but not least, something that's generally not recognized, he served as the highest ranking African American in the US service. He was made Major Brigade Inspector General of the Pennsylvania National Guard. And at the time that he was named Major, he was the highest ranking African American in the United States. Sergeant James Wilby, and I'm going to apologize for the picture because we just couldn't find a crisp, clear one. And if anyone has the original Allentown Messenger, please share it with me. But if you look to the right on your screen, you'll see this is his actual handwritten enlistment document where he enlisted in the 22nd Regiment of the Colored Troops. And this is signed and dated, as you can see, October the 12th, 1865. And he served with distinction. And if your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren want a project to look into, Sergeant James Wilby would be an excellent choice. He's come from a very unique family, and his contributions to Allentown, to New Jersey, and to his nation were extraordinary. Okay, go back one more. Okay, Stacy Wilby, his brother, one of his brothers, I should say, he too served as a private in the Civil War. And to your right on the screen, you also see his handwritten enlistment document. And at the bottom of it, towards the bottom, you'll see Miss Rachel Wilby, who Beavis and document is wife of Stacy Wilby, above named, and she signs off that he can go to war. And he did, and he served with distinction. According to your records, he actually put up the first beam on the original Union AME church to help build it. and he is interned at the Methodist Cemetery on Hamilton. And this is where I, always get goosebumps about Allentown. It's almost incredible to think and to be able to document that you had a cross-pollination of the Still family, the Cato family, the Newell family, the Lincoln family, and we'll talk about that a little bit, because Abraham Lincoln was the college roommate of Governor Newell, and they kept in close contact. So when Lincoln would come to see his great aunt, who lived in Allentown, he would spend time with Governor Newell. And while this piece that I'm about to say is undocumented, and we're looking to confirm it, he had the opportunity to have conversations, certainly with Governor Newell and with his young protege, Octavius Valentine Cato. That's extraordinary. I really can't think of many other places where you could have 3, 4 giants in this arena in one place at one time, including a sitting president. I'd like to talk about James Still. William Still is well known. I'll go back to some for those who may not be familiar with him. William Still is considered the godfather of the Underground Railroad. He did a meticulous set of documentations of who leveraged the railroad. He helped manage the conductors of the railroad. In fact, if you got to the stop in Philadelphia where he was based, you were taken immediately to his home, if at all possible. And he would document your story as soon as possible while it was fresh in your mind. And in fact, he had 2 young men, literally, they say 2, some say 1. We're still working through, I guess, confirming how much of it is accurate, that came and they told their story. And he realized quickly that it was with his older brothers that his parents had to leave enslaved as they found freedom in the North. Very, very, very prominent man. Also a well-lettered man in terms of how he conducted not only his business of the railroad, but his personal business, his accumulation of industrial companies, not only served himself, but it absolutely employed many, many, many Philadelphians of color for many years. So there's folks in Philadelphia who still will say William Still's name with a lot of reverence because they know what he provided, both in knowledge and in economic drivers for their families. And this is going back to the 1800s. But guess where he was born? Chemung, New Jersey. So, we look at 95 as this incredible highway to get back and forth from Philadelphia. Imagine if you were doing this on foot. Imagine if you had to walk from Philadelphia to Allentown, in the marshes, not along the roads. So when we talk about the strength and the tenacity and the persistence and the courage and the faith that our ancestors had to have for them to get to, thrive in, contribute to Allentown, it's stunning. It's stunning. One of the brothers of William Still is Dr. James Still. And what I love about his story is that he's a local guy, local to New Jersey, near Burlington County. For years, I had organ lessons in Cherry Hill, and then the school moved to Medford. And I couldn't understand why. I don't care what happened. My parents got me to those lessons in Medford. And I will always see this sign about a Dr. Still. I didn't know he was African American. I had no idea. But Dr. Still was a self taught herbalist and physician. He was well known as Doctor of the Pines. He wrote down many of his recollections, prescriptions, observations. He was known to be meticulous in terms of his documenting the spread of particular types of diseases and how best to address them. He attempted to enter into medical school on several occasions, several medical schools, and because he was of African descent, was denied. There is now the James Still Center. You are welcome to go visit it. It's chock full of great information. And as we move forward in the use of organic and herbal medicine, I'm sure his work will be republished as it is available today. The redemption of him not getting into medical school is that his grandson became the third African American to attend and graduate from Harvard Medical School. His legacy continues. And last but not least is Sergeant George Ashby and that line of the Ashby family. And I say that because while I totally appreciate the energy and the attention that Sergeant George Ashby gets, I am well aware that he was brought there as a child by a very, very courageous man who I discussed earlier for a better life. And while little George was enjoying a better life, his dad was running up and down the Underground Railroad and fighting in courts without proper representation and bringing up blood family members and communal family members so that they could have a better life. And he did this to the point that he exhausted himself at an early age and died in Allentown or Upper Freehold at that time. I think that impacted both George and his brother, whose mother remained in Virginia, free on paper, but remained in Virginia with all that that entails. And his brother went back down to be with their mom after their father passed away. The first opportunity that George got to serve, he was serving, I'm sure, everything went through his mind. I'm serving because it's the right thing to do. I'm serving because I literally have family that this impacts immediately. I'm serving that so that my children, when I have them, won't have to be under the yoke of enslavement. And he served with distinction. There's some other little known items that my publishing company doesn't want me to talk about, but I'll have to allude to because it just lets you know and understand the breadth of contributions of families like the Ashbys. Because I say all the time, our family cannot be this unique. There's some special things and we're proud of them, but this is the African American experience. Matter of fact, it's the African diaspora experience. I find these stories everywhere I go. I can be in Barbados and find that similar story. I can be in Jamaica. I can be in Brazil, similar stories. But one of the things that I found so, I guess, kismetic destiny is that George and his brothers because he had multiple brothers. All ended up serving in the Civil War, and four of them, including George, were in the Potomacs, which is a huge piece. They were also in the group that went searching for Booth Wilkes, and they also went to Texas and witnessed the first Juneteenth. That was a stunning find for me. I don't know if there's a Guinness World Record of family members all being in that same place at the same time and witnessing such a historical event or not, but it's humbling, very humbling. And George came back to Allentown. His brothers did not one of them. Some stayed out into the Midwest, others went back to Virginia. But he was committed to what his dad thought would be a good place for them to stay. Because as you know, the Underground Railroad goes all the way up north across the Canadian border. But his dad thought that Allentown would be a great place to raise a family. And when George returned, he married Phoebe Cole, the daughter of Reverend James Cole. He had multiple children, including William Ashby, who married Estella Nixon. And William retired from the Messenger after 20 years, the Allentown Messenger, for 20 years working there. And I was trying to figure out why the Ashbys constantly got in the newspaper. And when I found that out, it made sense. He made sure that their accomplishments were recognized and their contributions were recognized. His son William is the grandfather of Harold Ashby Sr., who we'll talk about a little bit more down the road, who married Isabel Turner, who's the daughter of Reverend James Turner and Isabel Chew Turner. So early in my presentation, we talked about intermarriage. Here's but yet another example of that. This is William's obituary as it was published in the Allentown Messenger. I think he would be satisfied, except for them misspelling AME Union. But what it gives you is a great insight into what was important to the Ashby family. Their treasures, what mattered most to them, was what the folks who came after them accomplished. And when you read this, they talk about his children, they talk about his grandson. And that's very much how the Ashbys of today are. We're pretty direct. We don't talk too much. I probably do more talking than 95% of my family. And we are about family and we're about progress. So when you start doing your genealogy story and you see personality traits and you see consistent patterns and trends, it helps you understand yourself because you know where you come from. And in this journey, I've had, God puts people in your path. I've had now cousins, because I call them cousins, come out of the woodwork in the most opportune times. I had a cousin who lived in Philadelphia. She's, my senior by many years, who reached out to me and she said, I've been waiting to figure out how my line of Ashbys who come out of the same area as yours, how we're connected. And I haven't been able to do it because I would love to be connected to Sergeant George Ashby. And I couldn't figure out why would that be so difficult? But then I got time to spend with some of the records in Virginia, and I learned very quickly that we're blessed, and hopefully, some of us on the call today are equally as blessed. There's a saying in this work for African Americans. It's called the Wall of 1865. And the Wall of 1865 represents the difficulty for African Americans to be able to find their ancestral information pre antebellum. I never thought of it as an obstacle because the Ashby family did. They were well documented for all kinds of reasons. And I have to thank the Methodist tradition, because it was the Methodist tradition that kept the majority of my father's side of the family from ever being enslaved. It was the Methodist tradition. And though, every now and then it bent, as the laws changed, it never broke. And when you get to see that in writing, you get to see how people who don't look like us went above and beyond to make sure, to the best of their abilities, in very, very strange and difficult times, that folks would not be enslaved. That too is humbling. And sometimes you need to see that. And you need to understand that not everybody is on board. Not everybody is bad. Not everybody benefited from slavery. And when you see the paperwork, and the one thing about the United States, at its roots, the folks were very, very meticulous in documenting every piece of hay, every nail, every spinning wheel, every bale of cotton, every pound of tobacco, and every person that was shackled. And you get to see how someone worked within their network of not only knowledge, but community to shelter people. It's amazing to see. So I always give a shout out to the Methodists, even though we had to create the African Methodist Episcopal Church because of challenges. The Methodists at their core, and those who were the front runners for the Methodist Church in the United States, particularly in the earliest colonies, I saw their work. They did what God told them to do. And my family benefited from that. And I'm thankful. So as we move through the 1800s and the 1900s, as you can see, the grandson of a formerly enslaved, or great grandson of a free man that had to go up and down the Underground Railroad and fight his own relatives, because we have Ashbys that are not African descent, and we have African descent, descended Ashbys in the same family. And you'll find that when you go into your genealogy, there's a lot of I call it double dipping, where sometimes you're double cousins. It's very, very interesting. And my father said, I don't know why you're upset. That's just a issue of proximity. Where were they going to marry people from less? And I would laugh, but I wouldn't laugh because I said, Daddy, there's no reason for people to marry first and second cousins. Come on. He said, well, you don't understand. It was a different time. However, what I do understand is that we're 3 or 4 generations from a relatively very different world. So when I get to see what Ashby's and other families have been able to accomplish, despite all of the barriers, It tells me that it's hope. It tells me that where you commune at church, in your home, makes a difference of who you are as a person, as a human, and your character, and in your moral standing. Union's AME's fingerprint is in every one of these folks, from the first slide to the last slide. This gentleman became the first African American Deputy Attorney General for the state of New Jersey in the 50s. This didn't happen in the 80s. It didn't even happen in the 60s or 70s. This was in the 50s. He became the first African American chairman of the New Jersey State Parole Board and was sued many times by people of color because he was the chairman of the board, and that's where the suits would get sent to, and he would be named. He's the first African American chairman of the Board of Education for Newark Public Schools. These are all firsts that would not be possible without the upbringing his parents, his community, and his church home didn't instill in him. Just simply wouldn't be possible. I know this is a grainy newspaper article, but this is where he was sworn in as the first African American Deputy Attorney General for the state of New Jersey. In front of him, and it's his son. Looks a little dark, but there he is. And that's Harold James Jr. And we'll talk about him a little bit. Let me go to Harold James Jr. because I think we'll just keep to the direct line of descendants. Harold was a graduate of Harvard College, had an MBA from Wharton School and University of Pennsylvania School of Business, master's from Hawaii Pacific University. He spent 25 years with his family in Japan, China, Hawaii, Israel, and Mexico. He was a teacher and administrative officer for the USAID at the American Embassy in Mexico. What I found so interesting about him, he recently passed, well, recent is always relative, he passed away, is that he's credited for creating the blueprint for global technology forums. I'm in technology, who knew? I stumbled upon this looking just for some information after I found his obituary. Up came a document that was so stunning, I thought it was from 2021, 2022. It wasn't. It was from the 80s. And he had put together a technology forum for the Foreign Service, which was focused on artificial intelligence. I'm still just in disbelief. Very, very bright young man. Once again, newspapers, articles will bear it, cards will bear it. His family's spiritual home was Union AME. Take pride in being from Union AME. It's a special place. It deserves to be respected. It deserves to be reopened. It deserves to be restored. And it deserves to be preserved. Pastor James is the right person at the right time. And we laugh about it when we talk to each other, because I literally have been trying to partner with Union for 13 years so that I can use my skill set to help a place that was a refuge, was a citadel, was a place of prayer, a place of hope, a place of safety, a place of encouragement, a place of aspiration, a place of achievement for my family and probably for all the families in Allentown, African American and otherwise. So when Pastor James asked me to, well, actually, I told her I would want to do this. I wanted to do it so that we can galvanize and let you know that there are many, 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 many of us out there who are branches off this tree and support you. We support you with our time, our resources, our intellect, our innovation, our creativity, because we're thankful. We're thankful. This is a house of service, and houses of service will always bring people who are willing and ready to serve. So I ask that you, one, if you didn't know this history, look at it. I ask you, two, share it. Three, preserve it. There's not too many places in the world like UNA and E. Thank you for your time.